Welcome back. In this clip, we'll create nParticles with emission type as a curve. So let's create a quick curve. We'll go inside the create. Inside the curve tools, we have CV curve tools. Let's move inside the option box and use the degree as 3. Now let's draw a curve. Pretty easy. Press enter. And with this curve, let's reposition this a bit, and we can also just scale this a little bit. That's fine. So now let's create the effect of particle emissions from this curve. So we need to go inside the nParticle menus and now use the option emit from the object. Move inside the option box. Now you must be thinking that if we have to use the curve, then why are we using the type emitter type as omni while we also have this option curve? Well, the simple reason is that if we use the emitter type omni or the directional, any of these, the particle will emit from the control vertices of this curve. Alright, let me just show you the control vertex of this curve. And now I do one thing. I'll select this curve and first I'll pick the omni as an emitter. Let's create this. Now if we play the timeline, you can see the particles are actually emitting from the control vertices of this curve, and they are going down because of the impact of the gravity. So you can select the nParticles and let's disable the gravity. Moving inside the dynamic properties and click the option ignore solver gravity. Alright, now if we play the timeline, you can see particles are still emitting from the control vertices of that curve. Alright, and one more interesting thing we can do, we can also consider that from which control vertices we want the emissions and from which we don't want. We can also set the emitter rate per point. So what exactly is this? You need to select the emitter for that. Alright, select the emitter and go inside the nParticles, and you have the per point emission rates. Alright, the moment you click this, you'll notice if you select the curve, you'll see we have total 10 number of rate pp attributes over here. So this is basically emitter 1 rate per particles. Let's do one thing. Let's disable the first one and leave the alternative. That's fine. And now if I play, right now we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. We have 10 particles emitting from this curve. With this change, we'll get only 5. So if you play the timeline, you can see now we have 1 2 3 4 5 particles emitting, or you can say particles emitting from the 5 sources of this control vertex. So this per point emission rates will basically provide you the facilities of controlling the overall emission from the particular point. Alright, now I hope so you must have got this thing. Now let's do one thing. Let's get rid of this kind of behavior. Move inside the emitter node and let's change the emitter type from omni to the curve. So the moment you click this, the per point emission rate won't be, if you select the curve and move inside over here, this emitter 1 rate pp will no more useful. So even you can set that thing to the 0 and still you'll notice once you play the timeline, now the particles will emit from the entire curve because now we are using the emission type as a curve. So if we go inside the attributes, now you have the full control with the distance, with the direction, with the spread, as well as the speed attributes. Right now you can notice these particles are moving away from the curve because we have normal speed. As we have also discussed in the previous clip, the tangent speed will let the particles to move along the surface or a curve, whereas the normal speed will take the particles away from the curve. Alright, so let's do one thing. Instead of the normal speed, let's go with the tangent speed. Alright, let's get rid of the speed. It's very high value. Let's go with the value of 0.1. And now if I play the timeline, you can see the particle will start moving along the curve. The speed is really very less. So let's do one thing. Let's increase this value back to the 1 and now just play the timeline. So now you can see these particles have started following the tangency of this curve, and you notice the particles will try to follow the tangent values. Alright, we can also create an effect in which these particles can use the directions. For example, we have the speed 1 and let's use the y positive as a direction. If you play the timeline, you can see now particles are started moving towards the y positive axis. Since the speed is very less, let's do one thing, let's increase the speed to the 5 units and now play the timeline. Alright, and there is a kind of a change because these, oh, I'm sorry, we also have the direction X enabled, so let's get rid of this and now let's play the timeline once again. So now you can see we have particles moving to the y positive axis. Alright, now let's create a very interesting effect in which let's use this curve as a wire and let's ignite this wire. So let's do one thing, let's first of all apply the geometry upon the entire curve. So for that we first need to have the NURBS circle, scale it down a bit and select this circle, select this curve, move inside the modeling menu. Over here we have surfaces. Now use the option extrude to provide a 3D volume to this, and over here let's go with the reset setting. The result position we want at the path, which is the curve, pivot to be at the component, and the curve range instead of complete use the option partial. Now this is very important option, and this will let you use the min and max values of the curve. Now let's hit the option extrude. So the moment you extrude, you can see now we have this curve encapsulated by a thick NURBS surface. We can also reduce the overall volume of this. Let's say this much is pretty fine. Now as you also can see, we have some noticeable points, or this curve doesn't seem to be quite smooth. So just select this one, press Ctrl A. Inside the extruded surface shape node we have the NURBS surface display. You can use the curve precision shaded attribute and give a high value, let's say 15. So with that you can rectify this. Pretty straightforward. Now the most important attribute is inside the input node we have the subcurve 2. We have the min and max value. If I select the min value and drag my middle mouse, you can see this curve is now falling along, this extruded surface is actually falling along the curve. This curve has its own value starting from 0 to the 1. 0 is the min value, whereas 1 is the max value. So I'm increasing the min value from 0 to the 1, so it's actually following this. Alright, let's do one thing, let's animate the whole value, put a key over here, and let's say at frame 60 let's use the value of 0.98 or maybe something 0.97 and put a key over here. Alright, so if you play the timeline, you can see we have this geometry flowing along the curve. So now let's do one thing, let's get rid of the existing particle system, delete everything over here, and now pay attention over here, select this surface, this NURBS surface, go inside the control vertices, select the first vertices. Alright, over here. Now with these control vertices selected, go inside the FX menu set, go inside the nParticles menu, use the option emit from object, and in this case you have to use emitter type as a omni. Hit the option create. Alright, now if you play, you'll see you'll get such a nice and beautiful motion of the particles. I do acknowledge that it's not actually making some sense at the moment, so let's do one thing, let's improve the overall behavior. First let's disable the gravity, so ignore the gravity over here. Let's also adjust the lifespan. Now inside the lifespan mode we have live forever, set this to the random range, use the option lifespan to 0.025 and lifespan random to let's say 0.010, and increase the speed with a very high value. Let's say we use the value 50 and speed random to the value 25. Alright, now let's also change the particle type from point to the streak, and use the tail fade to a value of 1. Use also the option called color accumulations. So now if you play the timeline, you can notice what we have actually. This is pretty nice, and I was talking about this kind of ignition process where we are igniting this curve, and that's something which is very interesting. So this is actually the startup. This is the starting point of our effect. Select the nParticles over here, and inside the emitter we can use the scale rate by speed. This attribute basically increase the rate depending upon the speed of your emitter. So let's get rid of this value, it's very high. Let's use a value of 5, and now let's play the timeline. So this is absolutely great, very nice. Let's also change the overall color of your particles. Let's use this color, and since we have already checked on the option color accumulations, so the more particles are added or overlapping, now they are producing some brighter value of the color. So this is the use of this color accumulations. We can also use this option, which is the anti-aliasing, and so it will going to create some much better effect. We'll get rid of the artifacts. Now play the timeline and you notice we have such a nice and cool effect. Now let's take a pause over here. Let's end this clip. We'll start with a new one where I will talk about the nParticles collisions.